So what's up people, and welcome to the Mission 83 discussion of Spy Family. So Mission 83 came out recently, and as always I will leave a link to this mission that's currently being shown on the publisher's official website, Manga Plus, for free to the North American audience. So if you're interested, we'll go take a look at it before they pull this mission back. Okay, so Mission 83 starts with the cliffhanger that was seen in the end of Mission 82, where Twilight was facing off against Yuri. They had both pulled out their weapons and there was a shot fired. And of course from that point on, the readers weren't sure what exactly happened, and Mission 83 continues on from that point. And what we find in Mission 83 is a story that is probably, from my perspective, the most spy type chapter out of all of the chapters that I've seen in the series. Yes, there has been a lot of other chapters, including the Bomb Dog mission and the Ocean Cruise mission, but nothing really marked of espionage as much as the chapters that we are seeing here. This is very much a spy versus spy sort of situation, and I'm really enjoying the story as it goes along. Now, with regards to that cliffhanger, yes, what we expected did happen, but it really showed the two characters, Yuri and Twilight, very well. As good as Yuri is, Twilight is considered the best agent of the West, and we understand by seeing what we see here. Because as handicapped as Twilight was, because Yuri is Yor's brother, and despite the fact that they fired and Yuri fired at Twilight while Twilight had no ability to be able to fire directly at Yuri, and because of that he gets his arm injured, he did find the one thing that he could do against Yuri, which was to fire at his weapon and disarm him. And considering the fact that he had an injured arm and he was completely at this disadvantage, he was successfully able to disarm Yuri. And so now with this situation, Twilight has a weapon, Yuri does not. This should have been an easy win for Twilight. But we see once again what we thought, which is that Twilight just cannot bring himself to attack Yuri, especially with a gun, and Yuri takes this advantage and disarms Twilight with a kick. And it's at this point that we are confirmed. Twilight does tell himself that he is hesitating and he is criticizing himself for making this mistake. And what we thought about in chapter 82 is confirmed in chapter 83, that because of the relationships that he has had with Yor and Anya, and considering Yuri is a relation of Yor, Twilight has gotten soft. And because of that, he is not as effective an agent as he was in the past. However, what this basically means is that he has become less effective of an agent because he has regained back some of his humanity. His compassion does become a handicap, but it does make him a more humane person than what he was when he was Twilight. The cold-hearted Twilight that was in the past may have actually killed Yuri under this sort of situation, but Lloyd Forger cannot. And so this gives us a very good understanding of what sort of character Twilight is. Now what we also get is an interesting perspective from Yuri. Yuri realizes that this is Twilight, but he sees that it's basically an identical representation of himself, not only in terms of appearance, but also in terms of voice and action and personality. And so Yuri is very surprised at just how well Twilight can mimic him. And because of that, he starts wondering, why does this guy know so much about me? Maybe it's somebody who has been in relations with me in the past. So this is a very interesting revelation that Yuri gets. And so with both people disarmed, what ensues is a hand-to-hand combat. And at this point, we see just how good Twilight is. Because despite being injured, he overwhelms the situation. Now, if you recall, Yuri ain't no slouch. He is considered one of the best rookies of the Astanian secret police, and yet despite Twilight being injured, Yuri has no chance of winning in a hand-to-hand combat. And with that, Twilight eventually does take him down. But of course, at this point, we get a very interesting perspective and an understanding of what sort of character Yuri is. Because despite Twilight taking him down, he gets up again and continues to fight. And no matter how many times he takes him down, Yuri actually gets up. And Twilight is absolutely surprised at his resiliency. And so finally he decides, okay, I ain't holding back. And when Yuri does attack, Twilight takes out his belt and slams the buckle against his chin. And that would have typically taken out any opponent. But once again, this is Yuri. So Twilight is amazed when Yuri gets up again. And Twilight wonders what sort of regimen this guy has taken. Now we all know as readers what has made Yuri this resilient. And that is, of course, Yor. If you recall in the 3rd chapter when Yor was holding hands with Anya, she mentioned that when Yuri was young, Yor hugged Yuri and broke 2 of his ribs. And so you can imagine living with Yor is a life-threatening situation, and the fact that he actually survived all this time makes one realize just how resilient he is. The other time was, of course, when Yor got drunk and kicked Yuri in the head twice, and yet Yuri got up again. And considering how strong Yor is, to be able to get up after those 2 attacks is amazing. And so yeah, a belt buckle versus Yor, yeah, I think the belt buckle loses, and so Yuri was able to get up again. And so at this point, Twilight's like, I can't hold back any longer. And with that, grabbing a metal pipe, he finally slams Yuri down as hard as possible. And he is surprised when Yuri gets up again. But finally, with that attack, Yuri blacks out. And at this point, we see a very interesting dilemma in Twilight's character. If Twilight was the old Twilight, we could see here from this image that he would have taken Yuri out. He basically would have killed Yuri, knowing how much of a threat Yuri is. But of course, this is Yuri, once again, Yor's brother, and Lloyd Forger cannot bring himself to do it, and with that, he leaves Yuri in an unconscious state. Now, with Twilight somehow being safe, the chapter goes back to the other members of the WISE organization, and they're still waiting at the hotel to see if Winston Wheeler will show up, and they're realizing that this is not going to happen. So they decide to go to a backup plan, and the backup plan requires that colleague of Twilight's, the one with the mustache, to actually don a costume and pretend that he is an agent of the Ostanian secret police, the one that would have received the information from Winston Wheeler. And the plan is by pretending to be this gentleman, whose name turns out to be Gascon, to see if by going out there in this disguise, he could bring Wheeler out. And so he goes out of the hotel walking down the street while having a couple of WISE agents follow him. And what we find out is that Winston, after being frustrated that Yuri went after Twilight, decided to go back to the hotel and scout the perimeter. We find out that he did go to the meeting place, but because Twilight had already left there and all the other agents had chased after him, there was nobody left in the park. And so the only thing Wheeler could do was to come back to the hotel and check what was going on. And he does see Gascon, or the WISE agent who is dressed up like that, and by noticing that there are WISE agents following him, that probably Gascon is also trying to get away from these agents. And that makes him realize that he also has to stay undercover and not come out into the open. And so as much as the WISE agent who's dressed up as Gascon tries to bring Winston Wheeler out, he does not succeed to do so. And so he decides to go into an extreme plan by having one of the agents actually get into a traffic accident right in the middle of the street. And when that happens, The agent, who is disguised as Gascon, looks around to look at the reactions from everybody. If it was a standard pedestrian, they should all be staring at the accident. But if it is an agent of the Astanian secret police, they might get distracted for a few seconds, but realizing that they still had a mission, will go back to looking in a different direction. And Gascon, or the wise agent who is dressed up as that, does notice a few people there, but when he looks at where they're looking, he does not see anybody who could be Winston Wheeler. And so he feels that he has failed, but it is at that moment that Fiona notices a certain gentleman who is looking in a different direction while facing the accident. And so under most conditions, they wouldn't have realized that this person was looking in a different direction because he is still facing the accident. But what it turns out is that this gentleman is looking at the reflections on the windows to see in a different direction where Gascon is. So by noticing that, Fiona realizes that that must be Wheeler. So she immediately starts chasing him. And Wheeler, being Wheeler, immediately notices that he is being marked, so he starts running away. And the chase goes on for a little while until Wheeler is finally cornered, and the chapter ends with Fiona identifying him. And so this creates another confrontation and another cliffhanger. This time it's not Twilight versus Yuri, but it's Wheeler versus Fiona. And as good as Fiona is, if Tatsuya Endo is going to make Wheeler a formidable adversary to Twilight, I got a feeling that Wheeler may end up being in the advantage here. And if that turns out to be the case, this may turn out to be a very tense situation for Fiona because Wheeler will not be holding back as well. And so it does make for a very tense situation to which the readers will probably wonder what's going to happen. Is Fiona going to be able to capture Wheeler? I doubt it because I got a feeling it's not going to end with the next chapter. But if that happens, is Wheeler going to do anything such as injure Fiona to get away? We won't know until we see the next chapter, and once it comes out, I'll bring out another video. I hope you join me at that time. But this is the Mission 83 discussion of Spy Family. If you read it, what'd you think about it? Did you think this was a very espionage, spy-esque sort of chapter the way I did? Any comments will be greatly appreciated. And until the next mission, happy manga reading, and as always, Jaya, nice day everyone.